Almost exactly a year after I started using EM Power, in 2003, I ran into another field called energy medicine. I was having a business lunch with a psychologist who knew of a colleague who attended a workshop on thought field therapy and saw, quote, someone resolve their phobia in 5 minutes, unquote. In psychiatry, phobias never resolve in 5 minutes. She might as well have said that someone had sewn a severed head back on a cadaver and brought the person back to life. The information just went in one ear and out the other. But the universe knew how I would respond to my first exposure to the impossible, so I was given a second chance to hear the information. 2 days later, I was talking to a social worker, Mark Botnick, who worked for a mobile treatment unit. One of my patients was too anxious to leave her home and couldn't come to her outpatient sessions with me, so I was helping the patient link to a mobile treatment unit for ongoing support. I shared with Mark that I was using a nutritional supplement to help my patients recover from their psychiatric symptoms, and he shared that he was using thought field therapy to help his clients, who were sicker than my patients, with their debilitating symptoms. Mark was using emotional freedom technique, or EFT, a form of thought field therapy, to help his patients. So he could have said EFT rather than thought field therapy, and I would not have known that they were the same thing. But he didn't. He used exactly the same 3 words to describe what he was doing that I heard 2 days ago. If I was hearing it twice in 2 days, something told me that the universe wanted me to know about thought field therapy. So before getting off the phone with Mark, I invited him to meet with me and teach me everything he knew about it. Mark introduced me to the field of energy medicine, starting with EFT and the diagnostic process called, quote, muscle testing, unquote. Nowadays, I just call it energy testing. After trying out the combined intention acupressure technique on myself and finding it helpful, I asked Mark to help someone who had a 2-year phobia of being left alone. He was a 6-year-old boy, and Mark used EFT to heal the child in half an hour. Later, the child used the technique to eliminate his fear of swimming in the deep side of the swimming pool during spring break. I did not know how EFT could shift a phobia so easily, but I was not going to pass up a tool that was effective, pill-free, and simple, no matter how strange the technique might seem to me. Applying muscle testing and EFT in my practice led to mixed reactions from my patients. Many found it very helpful. However, one patient said that muscle testing was, quote, evil, unquote, meaning that he thought it was coming from the devil. Another patient stopped treatment because using EFT led her to be more open to using, quote, crystals, unquote, and believe in auras, which challenged her Christian beliefs. I didn't know how to respond to such reactions. I had never used a tool that challenged people's spiritual and religious beliefs before. Less than 2 years prior, I was just a simple, conventional psychiatrist, giving out medications and doing psychotherapy. The negative reactions generally came from people who had strict ideas of what their religion would allow them to do. Other patients from the same religion didn't have any problems with energy medicine or energy testing. I personally felt immensely grateful and positive about nutritional and energy medicine support in my practice, so I had difficulty empathizing with those who rejected these approaches. Around the same time that I was learning how to use muscle testing to help me gather useful information about my patients, I ran into an uncomfortable situation with a company that sold EM Power. 6 months before, they had wanted to know what I did differently with my patients to help them achieve better clinical results than their patients. Since I was simply following what their assistant asked me to do with their supplements, I had no idea. But a year into using EM Power, I decided to write a letter to the president of the company. I shared with him my observation that patients would have a recurrence of their symptoms if they took too much EM Power, and that lowering the supplement restored the patient back to a more stable state of mental health. Given the company's desire to sell their product, it had a blind spot that they could not see, even after using it for nearly a decade among their patient population. After receiving my letter, the company refused to sell any more supplements to me. Since it was the only supplement that I used at the time in my practice, it put my patients and me in a very bad situation. I called the president of the company to discuss the situation with him, and he allowed the company to sell their supplement to me again after a little over a week. Apparently, some miscommunication had occurred between the assistant who worked with me and the president of the company. Later, the assistant had to take a leave of absence, and when I asked why, I was told that she had a recurrence of her bipolar disorder. After this unfortunate experience with the company, I decided it was time that I stop being lazy and start learning about other companies that sold high-quality nutritional supplements. But where should I begin? There were thousands of brands and supplements. How could I choose which brand to offer my patients and how to use them in an integrated fashion? I began by connecting myself with a natural pharmacy in Bethesda, Maryland. They sold supplements and employed people who had experience with different brands. With their guidance, I began to explore the use of other brands and supplements to heal my patients. Initially, when I first learned about helpful holistic approaches that supported mental health, I wrote to my colleagues and previous mentors. I wanted to share the benefits with them. No one, however, was open to a more natural approach. Again, I was surprised by the closed-mindedness of my colleagues. From my perspective, anything natural and nutritionally based that could be helpful for a patient seemed like the first thing to do before moving towards prescribing a medication, but that was not how other psychiatrists felt. Perhaps they did not know how it felt to be physically and mentally dependent on a psychotropic medication and didn't understand what it was like to be a patient. Or maybe they had more than enough to keep themselves busy and didn't want to learn about another field. Regardless, it didn't take long before I stopped sharing and pressed forward alone, exploring 2 new fields without a supportive network or system to guide me. After working with Mark for nearly a year, I started working with some women who were gifted energy healers. They were Reiki masters, but each person had developed their own intuitive abilities. One teacher could see my spirit guides. Apparently, I have an entourage of 8 in my aura and could intuitively sense information at a spiritual level. Another teacher was connected to angelic intuitive insights and channeled information. I began working with them to see if I could also learn to see people's auras and improve my energy healing abilities. I read in the book Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan that it took her 7 years of training to be able to see 7 levels of patients' auras. I thought to myself that I had spent 10 years to train in medicine, and that 7 more years to see people's energy fields and be an energy healer would be doable. I've been doing energy medicine since 2003, and I'm still as bad as ever at seeing anyone's aura. However, I became a whiz at energy testing. I also developed a systematic approach to sending life energy and helping patients learn easy techniques for self-healing. All very practical and not at all what I had hoped to accomplish in the beginning. I began pushing the boundaries of what I could do with muscle testing or energy testing in 2003. Over several years, I devised a way to convert functional information through a template of questions into numerical scales. My first questions involved creating a scale on how the patient was absorbing and digesting nutrients. Since I found myself using the question repeatedly, I saved it in a Word file. Currently, that file, which I call the Complete Analysis, has grown to 34 pages, consisting of tables and charts with thousands of scales created to help me gather functional data. I became a human lie detector, training myself to use my sensitivity to energy fields to sense what was true about a patient's functional status. Those early years creating the Complete Analysis and learning about supplements were filled with many late nights as I formed a foundation that unified functional medicine and energy medicine into a seamless treatment approach. To be continued.